Welcome to the Cultivating Resilience and Preparing for Fire Season panel on home and community preparation. My name is Jenny Harrow, and I am the co-founder and executive director of Integrative Healers Action Network, a disaster response nonprofit that organizes integrative health and medicine practitioners to deploy to a major disaster throughout the state of California. We formed during the 2017 Tubbs fire here in Sonoma County when we saw a gap in care during the 3-week fire response. And our volunteers provide services to evacuees and first responders for common symptoms such as stress, anxiety, overwhelm, physical pain, respiratory issues from smoke inhalation, trouble sleeping, and common symptoms that we see in the shelters. And we provide trauma-informed care training for our network of volunteer practitioners that offer services such as massage therapy, naturopathic medicine, acupuncture, homeopathy, chiropractic care, and a wide variety of mind-body medicine therapies. We are a proud community partner of the American Red Cross, and we typically set up our clinics at Red Cross shelters throughout the state of California. This will be our 4th year responding to fire season here in California after the 2017 Tubbs fire, the 2018 Camp Fire in Butte County, and the 2019 Kincaid fire here in Sonoma County. And this is the first panel in a series of 4 that we are doing throughout the month on fire preparation. It's for viewers not only here in Sonoma County where we're based, but for viewers really all over the state of California. And really actually any part of the American West that has also been experiencing an influx of wildfires these past few years. Since we are a healthcare organization, the following 3 panels will be more focused on preparing your mental, physical, and spiritual health for fire season. But we really wanted to start the series off with the fundamentals of what is needed to prepare your family, your home, and your community for fire season, especially given the other challenges that we are all experiencing right now with COVID-19. And our mission as an organization is to transform trauma into resilience for communities impacted by disaster. And we strongly believe that education, preparation, and practice are all key components of building resilience, especially during these challenging times. Before I introduce our panelists, I want to invite all of our viewers to please share your questions throughout this panel discussion. We've got a great panel of emergency management professionals that are here to answer any questions that you have about getting your home and community prepared for fire season. So please share. Since this Facebook Live is being shared on multiple pages, I think the easiest and most direct way is to send a direct message to the Integrative Healers Action Network Facebook page through Facebook Messenger to ensure that we can see your question, and then we'll be able to share it with the panel at the end of this discussion. So I'd love to start by also introducing our panelists. We have a great group of emergency management professionals. Thank you so much for everyone for being here today. And just going to give a quick little bio of everyone before we jump in, and I'll be handing it off to our panelists to really dive in about sharing tools and tips and resources for everyone. I'm going to start by introducing Dave Riegle. Dave Riegle has served as a federal employee with the U.S. Forest Service in a career that has spanned 35 years. His job titles include forester, wildlife biologist, and fire management officer. The use of prescribed fire prevention, and wildfire suppression were always part of his passion and duties. And during the last decade of his career, Dave has served in the development of fire and fuels mitigation strategies in selected communities by combining firefighting experience with the state-of-the-art behavior modeling software. Dave currently lives in the Midwest, but has fire experience in much of the United States, and that's including a lot of the state of California. Great to have you here, Dave. Thanks so much for being here. Next, I'd love to introduce Dr. Nancy Brown. Nancy is the Community Preparedness Program Manager for the Sonoma County Department of Emergency Management. She's originally from Southern California and earned a Master's of Science degree at California State University. Nancy completed her PhD in emergency management at Massey University in Wellington, New Zealand. And this interdisciplinary study combines the relatively new disaster science field with hospitality industry studies, community resilience, and organizational resilience studies. Her long-term objectives include development of pragmatic ways to build disaster resilience that engage communities and businesses in a systemic way, resulting in a culture of resilience. Thanks for being here, Nancy.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
And next, would love to introduce Priscilla Abercrombie. Priscilla has been a women's health nurse practitioner for more than 30 years and retired from UCSF in 2015. She is a board-certified holistic nurse and health and wellness coach. After leaving clinical care, she moved to northern Sonoma County to a community at high risk for wildland fires. She and another neighbor adopted a program called C.O.P.E, which stands for Citizens Organized to Prepare for Emergencies, in 2015 to engage the community in emergency preparedness. I'm going to let her be able to share more information about C.O.P.E, but this program is based on the concept of neighbor helping neighbor and has been adopted by over 25 communities throughout northern Sonoma County. A collaborative leadership group has formed with fire officials, local government, nonprofits, and C.O.P.E community leaders to work together to prevent, prepare, respond, and recover from emergencies such as wildfire. Dr. Abercrombie is also the chair of the board of directors for C.O.P.E. Thank you, Priscilla, for being here. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to our panel, and I think it'd be great to start with you, Dave, to just kind of help us lay the foundation of understanding a little bit more about fires. You know, when we were talking before going live, talking a lot about how empowerment through education is a key component for building resilience. And, you know, as we were all chatting before we went live about how, like, okay, we're in fire season, and every time I mention it, and Nancy, I got the same expression from you of like, all right, whenever we mention it to other people, people are like, no, we don't want to hear about this. Like, this has been a really challenging and stressful time with COVID-19 and just navigating all the challenges of this public health crisis. And so, you know, what our goal is just to share, you know, how can we be prepared in all the ways so that if and when a fire happens in our community, we can feel empowered to have the skills, the tools, and the resources to be able to navigate this with as much ease as possible. So, Dave, if you could just share a little bit more about your background and your experience with fire management throughout the state of California and the US, and what you have learned about fire management, and just any helpful tips and just education to share with our viewers of things that are important to know about fire.
Yeah, that's a loaded topic, I guess. You know, one of the things that I think about when you ask that question is really, you know, this sense that we're separate. I think as Americans, we tend to think of ourselves as separate from the ecosystems in which we reside, and that we're somehow, the rules of nature don't necessarily apply to us. And even the term fire management is one of those that you know, it's a little bit conflicted for me, because it's really trying to manage a natural process that is extremely volatile and shifts all the time. You might think you know something about the way fires are behaving, and then the weather really changes and the climate changes, and that's been the course of my career over the last 35 years. Has been over the course of that time. We weren't even talking about climate change when I first started, and there started to become conversations about climate change and how that was affecting you know, our weather and how it was affecting fire behavior. And I watched as that happened, and every year these fires that we were having with greater and greater frequency and with a greater amount of intensity were happening throughout, and places that were typically fire prone, as in California, but more seasonal. Those seasons have really spread for a longer duration, and it's really now almost possible to have fires almost year round in California, which typically had been more of a seasonal thing. So I think it's really important for us to think about where we're building and what we're doing around our homes, and really be prepared in and around the homes when you live in a fire landscape, which often much of California is. There can be a lot of stress related to that, but as we spoke earlier before we started, preparation really around your home and with your family and knowing what to do really makes a big difference in terms of your anxiety level. It's still unnerving to have a fire approach your community, but if you have a plan, if you practice those things that you are part of your plan, then, and also you take the necessary steps around your home, it's a lot less stressful. It can be. So I'm not sure if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great introduction to this whole conversation. And another question to connect to that is, what are some tips for people all around the state about how they can how can they help firefighters, if and when a fire happens in their area? Are there certain things that we can be doing in our yards and ways to help mitigate the spread of fires so quickly?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I can tell you that the priorities for firefighters it's really pretty much three-tiered. We always consider human life as the most important thing to make sure we protect first. And if we can't get past human life, making sure everyone's safe, then we really can't get to number two, which is to try to protect property. So you can help the firefighters become more effective by being prepared, and also being willing to evacuate, leave the area in a timely manner, even pre-evacuation, before it's mandatory. If you have those resources, you have that ability to leave and go stay with a friend or whatever. That's what you want to be able to do if you can. Preparation around your home, so you have defensible space. There's a lot of really good information out there about how to make your home more defensible, and Cal Fire has some really good information on their sites. It really speaks to fire-wise planning, and I think probably Priscilla and Nancy have both been involved in that type of interaction, I'm guessing, with fire-wise planning, community involvement, and then family involvement, your own family or people in your household, trying to what are you going to do when you get a call in the middle of the night? If you have, if you're completely surprised, as they were in Santa Rosa, what do you do? What do you do in that situation? How do you avoid being in that situation is probably the better way to approach it. So I'm not sure if that answered your question or.
No, it definitely did. I think it really comes to having these conversations with your family, start just normalizing fire a little bit. I think I grew up here in Sonoma County, and growing up, we didn't really have any major wildfires here. And I moved back to Sonoma County about a week before the 2017 Tubbs fire. And as a community, we had never seen anything like that before. It completely took everyone off guard. And so, we experienced the 2017 fire, which was devastating. And then in 2019, I think the community and all the firefighters, everyone had a lot of experience learning from what happened in 2017. And like you said, evacuating as soon as possible to allow firefighters to do their job. That's, I think, what was really successful in 2019 is, over 100,000 people were evacuated throughout Sonoma County, so that firefighters really could just focus on getting the fire out without having to, like you said, go in the order of making sure that human life is accounted for. So, Yeah, I think just normalizing it of like, all right, this is a part of our natural landscape here in California. We are in the midst of climate change, so fires are increasing in number and in severity as well. But learning about them and then learning things that we can do to have those conversations with our kids or our parents or our neighbors, and really excited to go on to Nancy. I think this is a good segue of how, yeah, just learning more about, you're with the Office of Emergency Services here in Sonoma County, and I know that you and your team have been very hard at work these last few years, and especially right now with fire preparation in the middle of pandemic, providing tools and resources that everyone in our community can start to just familiarize themselves with, of the checklist, the prep list, things like that. So would love to hand it off to you. And if you could just share us a little bit more about the Office of Emergency Services and some tips and resources and things like that for our community.
Thank you so much. And, I think it's important to also recognize how far the county has come from that surprise of 2017, that my job was created because of 2017. My department was created because of we have 12 full-time people working at the Emergency Management Office, where there was before a couple of people who were not necessarily even full-time help for this. So that's a big difference in terms of how we're approaching it and the importance that we put on it as a county, that it's not somebody's side job. This is 12 people's full-time job to try to figure out how we can lift this county to a state of readiness at all times for all things. And I think that's one of the things I'd like to maybe just talk about real briefly, is that we need to take an all hazards approach. And that's clear because while we were getting ready for fire season, we had a pandemic. While we're getting ready for a pandemic, we will have something else. Like years ago, they talked about education, where teachers were challenged trying to teach students because they didn't know what they were training them for, because they were training them for jobs that don't exist. And that's really what all hazard look at emergency preparedness is there's some basic things that we need to do just because it's good practice to have a resilient community have certain traits. One of them, of course, is connectedness in the community. So Priscilla and her group are an amazing example of how leaning into your neighborhood and your neighbors increases your resiliency. That, if you didn't get the warning, your neighbor's going to come knock on your door and tell you, we got the warning, did you get it? That you're banding together as people trying to help each other out, and all of the general preparedness things that we do. Getting ready by knowing how you're going to get your messaging, whether that's through SoCo Alert or Nixle or these other methods, making sure that you have a plan for your family for all different types of hazards, making sure that you have a go bag that can take you out of your house and be ready to leave and okay for 3 full days if you need to, making sure that you have a shelter in place kit, which we all know what that looks like now because we all began to shelter in place and see what it looks like to have a lot more food and supplies than we would normally have had in our home. So we don't have to go out to the store on a regular basis. So thank you, the entire county, for checking that off my list. You all got that done, but we're continuing on with these other things. But these things are things that it's not because fire season's coming. It's because this is the way we should just look at life, that we do not want to be caught by surprise and unaware of things that happen. Nobody likes that. What we want to do is we want to know that whatever happens, we go, okay, we have a plan for that. We know what we're going to do. We can stay safe. Our whole family can stay safe because we already know what we were going to do in this instance. And I think in this climate, it becomes more challenging. And it becomes more challenging because people, like you said, they really have had all they can handle in terms of what they're willing to do outside of just trying to enjoy a life. And that, the day-to-day news isn't nice. There's not a lot of positive things going on right now, especially with the COVID crisis. We're not at the end. People look back at March and think what they thought in March was going to happen. Oh, well, we'd be over by April, May, June. Well, now we hear in August thinking, we don't really know when this is going to be over. So it's one more thing. And so what we'd like to focus on, and what a lot of our things that we're doing this year are focusing on, is trying to just get people to take one little step. So whether it is, okay, just learn how to manually operate your garage door, so that if your power goes out and you need to get your car out, you can get your car out of the garage. Go learn that today. And then maybe next week we're going to ask you, well, why don't you just make sure you have enough water? And then, you know, why don't you just make sure of just these simple actions? You know, do you have a go bag? If so, check it. Make sure that the supplies are fresh in it. So let's just try to encourage people, not necessarily to try to jump into all of it all at once, but just take one thing on the list and do it. And then, you know, eventually you'll get there. But it's just too hard when we try to ask people to say, okay, go and get your plan and sit down at the table, and you and your whole family are going to spend the evening getting this. And that's ideal. I would love everybody to do that. We have a planning guide like this that's at our SoCo emergency website. You can download it. Your family can sit down. You can do this. But if that's too much for you, don't do nothing. Find something you can do. Just say, okay, today I'm going to do one thing to ensure resiliency in my family. So when something happens, when the power goes out, do I have a flashlight? Let's just start there. Okay, do you have a flashlight? Does it have batteries? When the power goes out, can you get your car out of the garage? When the power goes out, do you have a communications choice or method if you can't use your cell phone? So just start thinking of some of these just simple things that you can just do one by one. Our overall objective, of course, is that then when anything happens, every family is able to keep themselves safe. And that's really what it boils down to. And once I'm able to keep me safe, and once I'm able to keep me and my loved ones in my household safe, now I have a little bit of bandwidth to work out into my neighborhood and see how we can all work together to keep each other safe as well. So we can lean into some of those vulnerable people in our neighborhoods who may not have a car, who may not have the internet, and may not have access to different communications devices, and need somebody to reach out and tell them, this is what's happening, how can we help?
I love that. I love how you mentioned like just taking small incremental steps towards preparedness, you know, because I think you're right, like it's overwhelming right now. And what you're talking about reminds me of, it's a Stanford professor by the name of BJ Fogg. He has this book called Tiny Habits. And it's like the way to make changes and to change habits in your life is just to go very, very small, like incrementally, like even if it's just a minute a day and starting there, because otherwise it can be too overwhelming. And as we're really focused on cultivating resilience, and I like that you mentioned that, you know, how our community itself has been able to learn and cultivate a lot of resilience in the last couple of years because of the fires. You know, I've talked about that with a handful of other nonprofits and community leaders of like, all right, everything about life and our organizations and our programs and our work is changing because of COVID-19. But in a way, the fires have prepared us for that, because life changed like that in 2017 and in 2019 during our major fires. And we've learned how to pivot when needed. And in a way, it's a part of like building that muscle, building that strength of like, all right, this is challenging, but as a community, and like you said, it's starting with our individual homes and families so that we can, you know, care for ourselves first and then trickle out and ripple out into really working with our community, which I'm excited to have Priscilla share a little bit more about, about C.O.P.E. Northern Sonoma County, and just a little bit more about the resources that your organization has been working on having neighbors band together and communicate and work together before fires happen, so that if and when something happens, that the communication lines are already open. And we'll pass it on to you to share a little bit more about that.
Great, thank you. I'm so delighted to be here and chat with everyone about C.O.P.E. And I'm lucky to work with Nancy as well on this. So let me make sure I've got this going here. We'll get into a slideshow. I'm not, there we go. All right. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, we're ready to roll. All right, so as Jenny said, C.O.P.E. stands for Citizens Organized to Prepare for Emergencies. This program was actually developed by a group in Oakmont, which is a suburb of Santa Rosa. When we heard of the fires that were happening in Lake County in 2015, we got very nervous in Fitch Mountain and started to look for programs that might be available out there. We had started thinking, oh my goodness, we need to start developing a preparedness program for Fitch Mountain, only to think, wait a minute, we probably don't need to reinvent the wheel. We probably can go out there and see what's already available. And sure enough, in our very community in Sonoma County, there was a program called C.O.P.E. So that's how we got involved in C.O.P.E. and kind of took it and ran with it. And it's been a really versatile program, I think, and very adaptable to any type of community. So the mission of C.O.P.E. is really to help residents, families, neighborhoods remain better prepared to respond to any kind of an emergency. And of course, because of the recent fires, the devastating fires, we've really been focused on that. But we also know that we live in California, where we're really at high risk for earthquake. I live in an area that's on the Russian River, which is very high risk for flood as well. So in our area, that is another major focus for us. So why develop a C.O.P.E. program? What is it about C.O.P.E.? You know, it's really a grassroots program. We, encourage communities to become better prepared. It's not a government-sponsored program. Certainly we have government support, but that's not really what it's about. It's really about communities deciding that they want to be better prepared, and they go about it in their own way. It supports the development of those individual response plans, those emergency plans that Nancy just talked about that are so incredibly important. It also is about reaching out to the community and looking at community preparedness. For an example, developing a community wildfire protection plan, which we have done here on Fitch Mountain, really gets all the community together looking at what are the risks and what do we need to do to mitigate some of these risks. It's endorsed by a number of the different fire departments: Healdsburg Fire Department, Northern Sonoma County Fire Department, Santa Rosa Fire Department, CAL FIRE. Our county government is endorsing C.O.P.E. So these are all good things. This means that people understand what the program is, and they're ready to support us in doing this work. It really enables us as residents to be self-reliant. Again, what Nancy's really talking about, that idea that you have your go bag ready, you have your house prepared if you need to shelter in place, you have done the defensible space that David talked about, and being fire-wise and doing some home hardening, other things. It provides information to first responders that may not be from the area. One of the things we've learned about these large fires is that people come to fight these fires from all over the United States. In fact, all over the world, right? We've had people coming from the Pacific Islands to come and fight fires in California. So we need information that we can share with our first responders. We know our areas best, we know our communities best, and we need to share that information and work with our first responders. And as we know, it's easier to be prepared for an emergency when we all work together. It feels overwhelming to try to do this by ourselves, but when we're all working as a community, it's much more doable. And then finally, talking about resilience, it can't be a more important time for us to know who our neighbors are and to support each other. We need that right now. We need to reach out to each other and support each other. So those are reasons for C.O.P.E. So there are 7 steps to starting a C.O.P.E. program. I'm only going to go through the first couple just to kind of whet your appetite and give you a sense of what it takes to do something like a C.O.P.E. program. I don't think it's terribly hard. Here's my nephew driving the fire truck here. So if he can drive it for us. All right. So the first step really is to define your C.O.P.E. community. What is it where do you want to start? And I'm giving Fitch Mountain as an example. Here's a map of Fitch Mountain. We took Fitch Mountain, we delineated the unincorporated part of Fitch Mountain to start with as our community. And once we had that map, then we started to divide that map into smaller, what we call neighborhoods. And so we have a couple of leaders of the community of Fitch Mountain. I have a co-leader, Carol Morrill, and then we have neighborhoods within that community of Fitch Mountain, and we have about 8 neighborhoods. So now we have about 15 different COPE leaders, just to give you an idea of how that might work. But what's really cool is that there are a whole bunch of different COPE communities that have developed in what we call Northern Sonoma County, which is really Supervisor Gore's District 4 in Northern Sonoma County. And it's really fun to see all these communities start to get ready and do their COPE programs. And we all come together as a group, and I'll talk more about that. But again, building your community leadership. This is an early on picture of our COPE leaders here on Fitch Mountain, getting those 1 to 2 community leaders, and then enlisting people as neighborhood leaders is your second step. And then the third step really is the cornerstone of the COPE program, which is gathering information about your neighbors. So you want to, of course, have contact information about, you know, how do I get a hold of you in an emergency? So cell phone, landline, those kinds of things. But you also want to know, you know, is there someone in your household that has special needs? Is there somebody with mobility issues? Are there children? Are there pets? Of course, in Northern Sonoma County, there's all kinds of things to think about. People that are living on ranch that have livestock, how are they gonna get these animals off of their land? So there's a lot of information that we like to share through the COPE survey. And this is an example of the survey, which, you know, is available in a Word document so that you can adapt it to the environment of your community. And we've done that from the original Oakmont survey. So, excuse me, I'm losing my voice today for some reason. The other steps really are we put together a database for our community that summarizes the most important information that our first responders have requested from us. So again, highlighting things like people that have special needs, but also highlighting people that have special skills. We have a retired fire chief in our community. We have people that are healthcare providers like myself. You know, those kinds of things can be highlighted, water sources, other things that firefighters would want to know. And then, of course, you want to identify any kind of refuge sites that you might have or escape routes. Many of us have developed evacuation routes, additional evacuation routes in our areas. And then you're having ongoing meetings so that you're providing education and you're, you know, getting your database updated and really having that ongoing conversation with your emergency responders in your area. And finally, what Nancy again was talking about, making sure that you're maintaining your kits and with an ongoing effort, because getting to go back together is not a one-time deal. It's actually at least annually you're updating if you got your medications in there and refreshing. So just some ideas about getting started. Nancy again talked about alerts, and that's a great way to get yourself going. Sign up for these many different alerts that are available. These alerts are the alerts that are available here in Sonoma County. I would suggest that signing up for PG&E alerts is something that's really important as well, so that you know when your power is going to be out. Meet with your local fire agency. Who's your first responder agency? I live in the county, but my first responder is Healdsburg, City of Healdsburg Fire Department. So we have a very close relationship with them. They are aware of our issues here on Fitch Mountain. Become familiar with other sources of information. We have a whole array of fire cameras in this area, and they can be very useful if you smell smoke or see smoke to understand what's going on. And of course, being aware of red flag warnings and changes in weather that put us at risk for fire, so that you can really make sure that you're putting in mitigation efforts in your area. If you have somebody working in your yard on a red flag day, are they, at risk for starting a fire? So what kind of tools and what kind of work they're doing is really important for you to be aware of. Again, preparing emergency go bags. I really strongly suggest that you have a voluntary home inspection. Have your local fire agency come out, look at your home, and look at whether the work that you've done to see what your defensible space is like, to give you tips on home hardening and other ideas that you can do for vegetation management. And again, just really providing information about COPE and preparing. We've been very involved in preparing pre-attack maps in our area so that the fire agencies, again, have a map that they can look at if they're not from the area in particular, but to be able to see on that map the water sources in that area, to look at evacuation routes, to look at places of refuge, and all of those things that we just talked about. And finally, I would just say, we have a larger group of people meeting. We call it the COPE Leadership Group, but it's a group of individuals that consist of people like Nancy from the county, a representative from Supervisor Gore's office. We've invited Red Cross and a number of different agencies to sit at the table with us, along with all of these leaders of the various COPE communities, to work on issues that we face, whether it's vegetation management, whether it's signage for evacuations, etc. We try to set up programs that we can all adopt in our communities so that there's consistency and knowledge across agency about what we're doing and what we're up to. So I went through that quickly. I didn't want to take a lot of time, but just to kind of whet people's appetite about COPE, and hopefully people will go to our website at COPE Northern Sonoma County to get more information about how to start a COPE program. We do have office hours every third Tuesday of the month for people to come and ask questions and get started with COPE.
Awesome. Thank you, Priscilla. There's so much amazing information in there. And as you were going, we have questions coming in, and you're able to answer a lot of the questions just from your presentation. So thank you. I love what you were sharing about how this is a great opportunity to connect with your neighbors, especially with everything that's been happening the last few months with COVID-19. I find that when I'm taking a walk in my neighborhood with our dog, I'm even more excited to wave hello to a neighbor, or to say hi, or to have any opportunity for connection. I think is a really important and crucial part of building resilience during these challenging times, is connection, especially as we all have been a little bit more socially and physically isolated during the last few months. So, and I remember talking to you about how all of these meetings have gone virtual for COPE, which is such a great way for people to continue to get involved, to get to know their neighbors. One of the questions that I had that came up, and I think I asked you this a few weeks ago, but since you're based in Northern Sonoma County, is COPE extending their programs to other part, Santa Rosa, the south parts of the county, and Petaluma? Are there opportunities for this organization to grow to cover the entire county?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we talk to people from all over the place, and Nancy does as well. She could probably speak more to Santa Rosa and south. But yeah, we're willing to, get people started with our COPE office hours if people need help getting started from other areas. But I think, Nancy, what kind of resources do people have that are out of our area?
So the Santa Rosa Fire Department is very engaged with C.O.P.E and supporting the start of C.O.P.E groups. Petaluma Fire Department also very engaged with the C.O.P.E effort. They have somebody who will come out and give a presentation in your community, probably virtually now, talking about starting C.O.P.E groups. And then of course in Sonoma, because they're always a little bit quirky, they call it SCOPE. So it's Sonoma C.O.P.E. But their fire department also has been very engaged in the C.O.P.E movement in the county. And then it bears mentioning that, for instance, if you're in Sebastopol, the thing that's kind of caught on over there is map your neighborhood. And it's a similar type of concept. It comes from FEMA instead of our local roots here. But there's a lot of map your neighborhood groups that are supported by the Sebastopol Fire Department. So there's other different types of groups. There's some fire safe groups also. But almost every community has local support for community members who want to try to figure out how to get ready. I think what Priscilla's group is doing that is so great is that they have those office hours also. So wherever you are in the county, they've been so welcoming to just say, hey, come on, we'll help you figure out what your first step is. We'll get you your wings, and then we'll send you to fly back to your neighborhood and get it going. So it's been super helpful. And I know a lot of people have taken advantage of those office hours she mentioned.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. So another question coming in, what should be in a go bag? What should people start getting ready? Like, what are the different items that should be in go bags, and are there different types of go bags? And yeah, would love to hear more about that from you, Nancy.
Sure. And, we have tomorrow, and at our Facebook page, the SoCo Emergency Facebook page, we'll be posting a link tomorrow. But tomorrow we have our first go bag video in English and Spanish coming online. So you can download the video or look at it on there. It'll be a YouTube video, and you can see quickly what goes in your go bag. But basically, it's what you need for 3 days. So we don't want to be carrying a week's worth of supplies on our back. If you need to leave by foot or whatever it is, we'd like it to be a very mobile thing. We want you to have, base food and water for 3 days. We want you to have a communications method. So if you have your cell phone with you, also if you have an AM, FM radio, you have a flashlight, you have some basic first aid supplies. If you take life-saving medication for at least 3 days in that go bag, as well as copies of your important documents and prescriptions. And so it's really your lifeline that if you have the fire department or the sheriff's department going down your street with their high-low sirens and saying you need to leave now, you can grab this bag and leave right now, and at least have some of your life with you and be able to take care of yourself for a few days while you figure out what that next step is.
Yeah, I think oftentimes people get that mixed up with an emergency supply kit. And so I think the go bag is really just what Nancy was saying. It's something grab and go versus an emergency supply kit, which may be your gallons of Blue Barrel gallons filled with water and food for a couple of weeks. I mean, that's really what the shelter in place piece is about, is really taking care, being self-contained for a couple of weeks at home. So you have enough food and water and medications and anything else that you need to do that. So you may want some portable power generation, a generator, a small generator to run your refrigerator, those kinds of things. So that's kind of, I just wanted to bring that difference up.
Nice. And also you can find a list at SoCo Emergency, which is the County Emergency Management webpage, socoemergency.org. Under the preparedness section, there's a tab that says get ready. And you can find what to put in both of those kits. So what Priscilla was just talking about, your shelter in place kit, which is something 7 to 14 days, also your go bag. So a quick list of supplies of things to put in there and be ready to go. And, most people use a backpack. It doesn't have to be a backpack. It can be a small 5-gallon paint can. It can be whatever you have, but just something that you can pick up and carry and take with you if you need to go now.
Thank you. So we'll post the links to the website for your website and for your Facebook page as well, so that our viewers can get access to those lists, and then also get access to the videos that you're talking about in both English and Spanish. Such valuable resources right now, especially as we are all getting a lot of different information throughout everything that's happening. And so to get these little sound bites of, all right, here again, the small, tiny steps, little things that we can do to get prepared. Dave, I have a question coming in for you. So a viewer is saying, if I live in a highly wooded area, what should I know? Are there different considerations than non-forested areas?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess one of the things I would do is rely on resources that you have available to you in your local area. CAL FIRE does a great job of having people available that can come out and do a home assessment, as Priscilla was talking about. Why wouldn't you use a professional to really get on-site evaluation and give you some recommendations? There's some if you go to Firewise and look at some of the recommendations about the defensible space information, great information on there in terms of the zones that you'd want to look at your house. And I'm assuming that the individual lives in a home that is, I'm not quite sure whether they're out all by themselves or whether they're in a community, both of which are important considerations in terms of evacuation and evacuation routes. You know, what the fuels are, or, you know, what type of material is burning or would be burning in the case of a fire. So those are the things that you might want to think about, but certainly you have the time at this point to do the research or take a look at what's on the web. Firewise information is available, firewise.org, or CAL FIRE's got some great information about defensible space. Those would be two really good places. Even just typing in defensible space or for wildfire is a great place to start. So that might, I'm not sure, you know, if that depends on how much land they own around their particular place as well, to how far out they can actually manipulate vegetation. That is a consideration for them.
I would just add, you know, I think that when I first started doing this work, I had the impression that it was all the stuff out there that I had to worry about. I had to worry about the big forest, you know, and I had to worry about the fact that I live in this, you know, this wildland urban interface, and it got really big for me, and it got really scary because I moved to the trees because I wanted to live in the trees, right? And my neighbors felt that way too, you know. It's kind of like, oh no, we're going to have to, you know, make moonscape out here. And I think the most important message that I've gotten is work at your house and work out. Start at your own house and be aware of the first foot away from your house, and then the next, you know, the first 5 feet, and then work out as far as you can to make sure that your space is, and the piece that you have control over, is safe. And I would just put in another for another information resource, but besides what David's mentioned, Firewise is really great, is Fire Safe Sonoma for people that are up in this area, which is our fire council up here. They have some great information as well.
Great advice, Priscilla. And I must say that, you know, had there been organizations or collectives like C.O.P.E or others when I first started in my career, I wouldn't have nearly as many harrowing stories to tell and bore people with. But you know, it's really hopefully help alleviate some of those fears. And to piggyback on what you'd said, went literally around your home, we tend to think about a forested environment as the place where, because it's a forested environment, my home is going to be wiped out by this huge flaming front. And we tend to see fire on the news that's really catastrophic and huge, because that's what makes the news. Small fires, as well as medium and larger size fires, destroy homes all the time. And a good part of that is from ember showers. So not actual fire impingement on your home, the flames running up against your home, but really embers hitting in places that, like needles on your roof or in your gutter or underneath your deck or catching your furniture on fire out on your deck. That, you know, things that we just don't necessarily, if you're not a firefighter, you don't think about as fuel per se. You don't, so rely on those resources that you have available to you, and it really will alleviate if you start taking positive steps. Use these great resources, Nancy, Priscilla. You know, use those resources with these folks that'll help you take positive steps and alleviate some of that concern or anxiety. You know, that's for me, that's a take home. I'm too slow-witted to think of things all at once. People don't do well in panic situations, but you can, as Nancy had indicated, do a little bit today, do a little bit tomorrow. Take positive steps every day and improve your lot in life and reduce your fire risk.
And it's like we're building muscle, these like resiliency muscles of, you know, doing a little bit every day. It's like when you're just starting to work out, it's like we're not going to go and run a marathon immediately. It's like going and taking the small steps to start getting your body moving and eventually get to where we may be ready for that marathon eventually, but it takes practice and commitment. And what I love about this conversation is just, you know, that we're not alone in this, that we're so lucky to have community organizations like Priscilla's and a team of 12 full-time disaster and emergency management professionals in Sonoma County dedicated to preparing for this and providing such a large variety of tools and resources for our community, and having firefighters who have dedicated their life to learning about fire and keeping our communities safe. You know, I think that's really what's sticking out to me right now, is just the importance of community in all of this. Like we're not alone. We are all able to work together and learn from each other. And I loved your recommendation, Dave, of, you know, like these resources are out there. Connect with CAL FIRE and get a professional to come to your home and help you out. You know, we are not all going to be specialized in knowing about fire prevention and things. So let's use the resources that we have available, that we're so blessed to have in our community and all over the state. So thank you so much. We've got a few more questions coming in before we head into the hour of wrapping up. One of the questions, it's kind of a simple one, but also something that I've thought of, you know, and this may be going to you, Nancy, of, you know, say when a fire happens, how do you know which direction to evacuate to? Like if you're in Santa Rosa, do we go north? Do we go south? Like how will that information be shared for when something is happening through the alert system?
And so usually what they will do is they will tell you when your area is being evacuated, which direction to head. One of the comments from a previous year was that some people didn't really understand when they said evacuate now, head north. They didn't really know what that meant exactly depending on their area. So I'm sure our new messages will be a little bit, it gives something a little bit more also with regard to the direction that north is for those people who aren't north-south savvy necessarily. But you will get, if you're signed up for SoCo alerts, which you can do it at socoalert.com, you'll get a text message, you can get a voice message, you can get an email that tells you an emergency evacuation is in order, go this direction. And so they'll tell you which way to go to avoid the fire if your area has a specific direction. I mean, sometimes depending on where the fire is, they're evacuating it, it's behind you. So you need to just get to the 101 and go either direction, and that would be fine too. But they do definitely try to give you an idea of where the fire is. And so if you know where you are and where the fire is, that tells you which way you need to go. So part of everybody's planning is, of course, and I know Priscilla mentioned just the other day, you need to have a plan for more than one way. That it seems like a lot of times everybody's like, oh, we're just going to head south. Well, that might not work for you in a specific instance. So be sure you have a plan for both ways. That you're gonna go this far to go see Aunt in Eureka, or down there to go see your uncle in San Jose. What are you gonna do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would just add to that some people don't understand there's kind of a separation of activities so the firefighters are not the ones who tell you what direction to go and when to evacuate. That's the sheriff's department that does that. So I just want to help people understand the different roles. I mean, you know, our firefighters are really here to fight fires, and so they're going to be really kind of trying to figure out where that fire is and how to best manage that fire. And so it is our police departments, sheriffs, those types of folks are that are going to tell us when it's time to evacuate, and they're the ones really in charge of Nixle, which is the alert that we get for that. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, well, it looks like we have all these links are posted on our Facebook page. So yeah, just inviting all of our viewers, please sign up for these alerts if you haven't already. I think a lot of locals already have after the 2017 and 2019 fires, but go and make sure that you're signed up and, you know, ready to receive alerts. And, you know, you brought up the point of, like, you know, having plan A and plan B and plan C, you know, and having these conversations with family and friends, north and south. And that was one of the questions that we were going to have someone from the Red Cross join us today, but they weren't able to join. And just to get an update about shelters, and, you know, this is a totally new situation. And I know we're running a little bit out of time. So, but, you know, what's it like to evacuate during a pandemic when we have social distancing measures in place? The shelters, I know I've been getting the updates from the Red Cross of they're having they're having the plan A, plan B, plan C, you know, of how they're going to be sheltering people safely. But just wondering if Nancy or Priscilla, if one of you can give us an update on what you've learned about from the shelters and how to evacuate and shelter safely during COVID-19.
Well, I'll let Nancy talk about the shelters. I just wanted to say, as far as go bag, you know, 3 things that I would think of. 1, make sure you have an extra mask or mask in there, hand sanitizer. And of course, you know, you're fighting 2 things with your mask, right? Both smoke and you're trying to protect yourself and others. So just keep those things in mind in your go bag, and I'll let Nancy talk about the shelters.
And so just real quickly, the Red Cross and the state of California have issued a whole set of guidelines for sheltering. And it makes the common sense that you're already aware of, which is obviously shelters are not going to be able to have the capacity they could have before. They're going to have a lot fewer people because they are going to have shelters with social distancing for people in terms of cots as well as in terms of congregate areas. Meals will not be served as buffets. They'll be served as individual servings. So all of those kinds of things taken in mind too. And then they're going to also have a pre-staging area for shelters where people will be pointed to with their alert evacuation message. They'll be pointed to a pre-staging area. And at that spot, people will be pre-screened with regard to COVID to make sure that if people are symptomatic or do have fevers, that we send them to a different area and than we would to a more congregate setting. So those things are all being planned currently. The Red Cross, of course, and then the sheltering committee for the county are working really hard to try to identify additional sheltering locations, because again, we won't be able to have the capacity we had before. But I think one of the key messages the Sheriff's Department's been trying to broadcast to us is we have been being told for months to stay at home. If you are asked to evacuate, evacuate. Don't think, oh, I don't want to go out, I need to stay home. Evacuate. We will keep you safe out there. If you have the capacity to have a backup plan of your very own where you can go to your friend or neighbor and not go to a community shelter, absolutely make that plan for yourself right now. But absolutely evacuate if you're asked to evacuate. That is, when you're asked to evacuate, you need to go.
Absolutely. Oh, there's so much valuable information shared today. Thank you so much, everyone, for your participation and sharing your wisdom and all the resources that you've been working so hard in developing and creating and making sure that our community is prepared and safe for anything that comes up. And so I want to thank everyone who's been viewing at home. About watching our Facebook Live. That, like I mentioned at the beginning of this series, this is a first of a 4-part series that we'll be having every Thursday at noon via Facebook Live. And each week we'll be talking on different topics of different ways to start cultivating resilience and preparing for fire season. Next week we'll be talking about preparing your mental and emotional health for fire season. The following week we'll be talking more about physical health, ways that you can, things that were talked about a little bit in this panel of, you know, if you have medical conditions, to make sure that you have those in your go bag, but also ways to support your immune system and your respiratory health, and things that are going to be higher concerns during fire and then also during pandemic. And then our last week, we're going to be talking about ways to cultivate your spiritual health during this challenging time, and preparing for fire season as well. So Nancy, Priscilla, Dave, thank you so much for being here. Really, really grateful for your time and energy and wisdom. And for our viewers at home, thank you for being here, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone again next week. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.